Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Ipagpapatuloy na natin yung variable costing and absorption costing. We will now proceed to problem solving. So again, in variable costing, ladies and gentlemen, ang product cost po natin ay mga variable manufacturing cost. Direct materials, direct labor, and variable overhead. Yan po ang product cost. Yun namang sa absorption costing or full production costing or conventional costing or traditional costing, ang product cost natin ay direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead, and fixed overhead. Ang pagkakaiba ng dalawa ay yung treatment ng fixed overhead. Na-discuss na natin kanina, no? Yung difference ng dalawa as to presentation in income statement, as to the difference in income, and how do we reconcile the difference in income. At yung ating dinidiscuss na variable costing, ladies and gentlemen, ay yung traditional na classification ng direct labor bilang variable cost. Hindi ko nabanggit kanina, no? Pag automated yung operation, ang labor cost, nagiging fixed cost eh. The trend actually in the past decades ay trend toward fixed cost talaga. Pag traditional na manual intensive, ay talagang yung ating direct labor, traditionally that is classified as variable ang behavior. But under the throughput costing na tinatawag, where the pure variable cost is just the materials, we compute our contribution margin or throughput contribution margin as revenue or sales minus direct materials. Because in that case, the rest, like labor and the other costs, we treat that as fixed cost. Well, anyway, we are not going to elaborate on that because hindi naman kasama yan sa Mass 1.2.4, ano? So, we now proceed to problem number 1. Let us compute the unit product cost, the cost of ending inventory, the cost of goods sold, and we prepare the income statement. Basic illustration, simple illustration. So again, under absorption costing, ang ating unit cost po kasama ang fixed overhead. And then there are 3 valuation systems or cost accounting system. May actual costing, may normal costing, at may standard costing. Pag actual costing, actual lahat, actual materials, labor, and overhead. Under the normal costing, actual materials and labor, but in the case of overhead, normal or estimated. So in there, we have a predetermined overhead rate. In standard costing, predetermined lahat. Pag standard costing, we will elaborate on that. Now, bakit ko nabanggit yan? Kasi pwedeng ang mangyari, absorption costing, actual absorption costing, normal absorption costing, standard absorption costing, actual variable costing, normal variable costing, standard variable costing. Yun ang mga possibilities, ladies and gentlemen. Ngayon, this is an actual costing. This problem number 1. Apparently, because there is no predetermined overhead rate. So, the total fixed overhead, actual, we are going to charge that, or we are going to allocate that to the units produced. And you know the consequence of doing that na there is no predetermined overhead rate? Ang ating fixed overhead per unit, bago-bago yan, depende kung ilan ang na-produce. Wala tayong predetermined, ano? Pwedeng magbago yan year 1, year 2, year 3, etc., etc. So, we compute the fixed overhead per unit. Ang fixed overhead per unit po dyan ay 100,000 fixed factory overhead divided by the units produced na 10,000. So, that's 10 per unit. So, 10 per unit and then materials, labor, variable overhead na 20 plus 8 plus 2. We have 40 unit product cost under absorption costing. To compute our ending inventory, that is very simple. Our units produced are 10,000 and then units sold po ay 8,000. So ending inventory in units, 10,000 minus 8,000, that is 2,000. Times 40 per unit, we have 80,000. Ending inventory under absorption costing. For our cost of goods sold, 8,000 units times 40, that is 320,000. We prepare the income statement. So you can see there that the costs are presented or classified by function, not by behavior. So there is no need to show how much of the cost of goods sold na 320,000, magkano dyan ang variable, magkano ang fixed. No need. So 600 minus 320, that's 280,000 gross margin. Less selling and administrative expenses, that is 248. Our per unit variable selling and admin is 6. Our fixed is 200. We sold 8,000, so 200,000 plus 6 times 8,000, that's 248. And so we have that 32,000 operating income. Okay? Now, under the variable costing, our unit cost, unit product cost, ay yung mga variable manufacturing cost lang. So, we do not include the fixed overhead, kaya 30 lang po. Ang difference, syempre, yung fixed overhead. Sa may ending inventory, hindi kasama yung fixed overhead din, syempre, 60,000. So, you can see the difference, 80, 60, because yung 10 per unit times 2,000 ending ay hindi natin isinama. Kasi yun po ay charge sa expense in the period incurred. Yung buong 100,000 na fixed overhead, that will be charged to expense in the period incurred. We do not assign that to the units produced. Okay? And the variable cost of goods sold is 240,000. That is very simple, 8,000 times 30. Now, in the income statement, the expenses will be presented according to behavior. From the revenue, from the sales, we deduct variable expenses. Yung variable cost of goods sold, tsaka variable selling and admin, to get the contribution margin na 312,000. Then we deduct the fixed expenses. Yung 100,000 po at 200,000, yan po ay 300. Operating income is 12,000. So there is difference in income na 20. We can reconcile that income dahil dun sa fixed overhead, ladies and gentlemen. Pansinin niyo yung 100,000 na fixed overhead, pagdating sa variable costing, yung 100,000 nakadeduct sa revenue. Pero pagdating po sa absorption costing, yung fixed overhead, hindi po 100,000 ang nakadeduct sa revenue. Dito po sa 320, ladies and gentlemen, yan po yung units sold na 8,000. 8,000 times 10, 80,000, yun po yung fixed overhead na naka-charge sa cost of goods sold. 80,000 lang. Nasaan yung 20? Nasa ending inventory. Samantala, sa variable costing, buong 100. Kaya nagkaroon ng difference ng income na 12. We can reconcile that using this schedule. Or the shortcut analysis there is production minus sales times the fixed overhead per unit. 10,000 minus 8,000, 2,000 times 10, 20,000. 20,000 is the difference in income. 20,000 is the difference in income. At dahil mas mataas yung units produced, ayun nga, mas mataas ang income ng absorption costing. So here is the reconciliation. Kung dito tayo mag-start sa absorption costing income, 32,000 plus fixed overhead in beginning inventory. But in our case, wala tayong beginning inventory. Bakit yan i-add? Ang fixed overhead in beginning inventory, under absorption costing, it becomes component of the cost of sales. Ngayon lang maidideduct yan sa revenue. But in the case of variable costing, last year pa or kung kailan yan na-incur, in the period it was incurred, doon nakadeduct. So we add it back to convert it into variable costing income. Less fixed overhead in ending. The reason, yung pong fixed overhead in ending inventory, under absorption, hindi pa yan nakadeduct sa income kasi nakadiffer pa yan sa ending inventory. Bawas natin. Ayan po, 12,000. Okay? Yan. Yan po ang pag-reconcile ng income, ng absorption, and variable costing. Next, we proceed to problem number 2. We'll illustrate 2 years naman kung ano ang magiging effect sa ating reconciliation. Apparently, this is an absorption costing income statement. Well, it has been said there na absorption basis. We will recast that or we will redo that into a variable costing income statement. We will arrange the cost, we will present the cost or the expenses in according to behavior. So here is the income statement for 2 years. Year 1 and year 2 under variable costing. Yung ating product cost po ay 12. Ito po yan, ladies and gentlemen. 18 yung unit product cost ng absorption. Huwag natin kunin yung 6 kasi yan ay fixed overhead. Alam nyo naman, pag variable costing, hindi yan product cost. So, we deduct it. 18 minus 6, that's 12. Or 4 plus 7 plus 1. And then our variable selling and admin is 2 per unit. Year 1, units sold 40. Units produced 45. Year 2, 45,000 units produced, 50,000 units sold. So here are the variable expenses. Variable cost of goods sold. Ayan po, sa year 1, 40,000 times 12. Sa year 2, 50,000 times 12. 480 and 600,000 respectively. For variable selling and administrative expenses, 40,000 times 2. For year 1, 50,000 times 2 for year 2. Total variable expenses, 560 and 700. So the contribution margin ay 440 and 550. Bawas natin yung fixed expenses dyan. Yung fixed overhead na 270 plus 130, that's 400. Plus, makinig kayo, ano? Pagdating sa variable costing, ang fixed overhead na kukunin ninyong i-deduct, yung actual palagi, actual fixed. Kasi, maaaring sa information or sa problem, alam niyo naman ng overhead, maaaring ibigay dyan mga budgeted fixed overhead, applied fixed overhead, under absorption costing. Pero kung variable costing ang gagamitin natin, hindi naman natin kailangan yung applied fixed overhead dyan sa pag-compute. Unang-una, hindi natin ina-apply yung fixed overhead sa units produced. Basta yung actual na fixed, yun ang i-deduct as expense sa pag-compute ng income. So, the operating income, year 1, year 2, 40,000 and 150,000. Kanina po, ito yung income, 70 and 120. Why the difference? Let us reconcile. Pag ang production is greater than sales, mas mataas ang income sa absorption, no? Year 1, mas mataas ang production. Kaya pansinin ninyo, 70,000 ito, absorption, pagdating sa variable, 30,000 lang, 40,000 lang. Ayan. Reconcile natin yan. Absorption costing income, add fixed overhead in beginning. Sa year 1, wala tayong beginning inventory. Less fixed overhead in ending, 30,000, kasi 45 yung na-produce. Ito po yan, 40,000 ang unit sold. 6 per unit ang fixed. Kaya ang amount ng fixed overhead na naka-differ sa ending inventory ay 30,000. We'll deduct that. So, the variable costing income is 40. Yan pong ending ng year 1, magiging beginning ng year 2. Ayan. We add from 120. We do not have ending inventory. But of course, pag may ending inventory, i-deduct nyo lang. In the illustration, walang ending sa year 2, wala namang beginning sa year 1. But that is not always the case. But one thing is certain there, yung fixed overhead na naka-differ sa ending, sa subsequent year, ma-charge na yon sa income. Mababawas na. Magiging component ng cost of sales kasi yan under absorption costing. Pero pag variable costing, it must be charged to income in the period incurred. Kaya nga nire-reverse natin yung treatment. Halimbawa, sa year 1, binawas natin kasi under absorption costing, hindi pa yan binawas sa income. In fact, binawas nga yan sa pag-compute ng cost of goods sold. Di ba, ang ending inventory, dinideduct sa total cost of goods available for sale. Under variable costing, buong 270,000 naka-charge na sa expense dapat, kaya dinideduct natin. Sa subsequent year, under variable costing, hindi na dapat yon i-deduct. Pag absorption, i-deduct pa lang ng year 2 yan eh. Element kasi ng cost of sales yan. Kaya nire-reverse natin yung effect, kaya in-add back natin. So, ayan po ang reconciled income. Or simply production minus sales times fixed overhead. Yan po yung difference ng ating income. Well, in this case, kasi walang beginning dito, walang ending dito. At ang production dito, parehong 45,000. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, 270 divided by 45, that will remain at 6. This is an actual costing class. Pag nagkataon sa year 2, hindi 45,000 ang units produced, hindi na 6 per unit ang overhead dyan. Kaya pag actual costing pag reconcile nyo talaga, tingnan ninyo kung ilan ang na-produce. Okay? Next, we proceed to problem number 3. And we illustrate the computation of over or under applied fixed. The expected annual capacity is 90,000 units. The fixed overhead budget is 480. And it says that other than any possible under or over applied, management expects no variances from the previous manufacturing cost. So, we will assume na ang variance lang ay due to the fixed overhead, ano? Under or over a fixed overhead is to be written off to cost of goods sold. So that means wala tayong mga spending variance sa overhead sa ating assumption. Paano ba kukumputin ang under or over applied pag variable at absorption? Pag variable po, 0. Wala tayong over or under applied fixed dyan. Bakit? Hindi naman kasi natin ina-apply yung fixed overhead sa products. Period cost kasi yun eh. So, ang absorption costing, dyan lang po tayo magko-compute. Pag variable costing, wala po tayong volume variance dyan. Wala po tayong magiging computation na. 0 ang kwan dyan. Volume variance or capacity variance. Or over or under applied fixed overhead. Wala tayo niyan. Maaaring may variance, spending variance. Kasi syempre actual and budget na fixed. Ganun lang naman yun eh. Pero it's not a production cost. It's not a production cost variance. Kasi it's not production cost. Period cost ang treatment dun eh. So we are only illustrating absorption costing class to compute under or over applied fixed. We first compute overhead rate per unit. 480,000, yung budget po, 480, over 90,000. The overhead rate per unit is 5.33, rounded. We now compute our under or over applied. And since it says na no variance other than the denominator variance ng fixed overhead, we assume that the actual fixed overhead is equal to the budget. Kasi ang tunay na gagamitin dyan, ladies and gentlemen, actual. Ang pag-compute ng over or under applied fixed ay actual minus applied. Or in general, pag total overhead, actual total overhead minus the applied factory overhead. That's the over or under applied. Na pag analysis ng variance, i-breakdown mo yon into spending variance or into controllable variance and volume variance. Tapos yung controllable, pag three-way, i-splitin natin uli into spending variance and efficiency variance. Under four-way, i-split uli yon yung spending into fixed spending and variable spending. But of course, that analysis na four-way, doon lang natin magagawa yan sa absorption. Kasi sa variable, wala naman tayong fixed spending variance eh. Well, balik tayo. Bukas po yung variance analysis doon sa may lecture natin sa cost accounting sa hapon. Ang variance analysis kasi ay MAS and AFAR. Binibigay po yan, kaya magsasabay na bukas, alauna. Pero ang start ninyo, alas 9 for job order costing under Professor Michael Season. 9 o'clock po, then 1 o'clock, I'll be taking up variance analysis and standard costing. Balik po tayo. So, applied fixed overhead is 85,000 times 5.33. Our under-applied is 26,950. Ulitin ko po, actual fixed overhead less applied, 26,950. Yang under or over-applied fixed class, under absorption costing, dalawa ang klase ng variance dyan na lalabas. Volume variance at spending variance. Fixed spending and volume variance. If we will make an analysis. But of course, if actual fixed overhead is equal to the budgeted amount of fixed overhead, there is no spending variance in that case. All under or over-applied fixed overhead is mainly due to denominator or mainly due to volume. Nag-a-arise yan sa pagkakaiba ng denominator na ginamit sa pag-compute ng overhead rate at ng activity or capacity na ginamit sa pag-apply. Alam nyo naman, pag magko-compute ng overhead rate, estimated capacity, kara-karaka, pag ikaw ay magko-compute ng applied, yung na-compute mo na rate na binase mo sa estimated, times mo sa actual, syempre, hindi mo, mayroon at mayroong unallocated dyan pag hindi pareho. Kaya ang ibang tawag dyan, denominator variance kasi. Denominator variance because denominator or capacity variance kasi it arises from the difference in the capacity used to compute overhead rate and the capacity used to compute the applied. More on that pagdating sa variance analysis. Okay? Be familiar sa pag-compute ng over or under applied. Yung reconciliation at saka illustration ng income statement ay na-illustrate na natin kanina. Dadako muna tayo dito class sa problem number 4. Ito po ay computation ng income, pero hindi na in the form of income statement. Compute na natin directamente. So, 5,000 units yung na-produce, 3,800 yung sold units. Tandaan ninyo, yan pong 5,000 units na yan, units manufactured, i-allocate natin dyan yung production overhead or fixed overhead na 20. So, ang ating fixed overhead per unit, ito po, 20,000 over 5,000, that's 4 per unit. Therefore, our total cost of production per unit, because we have variable production of 4 plus 4, that's 8. So, we compute the gross margin, sales price 15 minus 8 unit cost, that's 7 actually, times 3, 8. The gross margin is 26,600. So the income under absorption is 26,600 minus the selling, general, and administrative. Selling, general, and administrative, we have there fixed 14, and then variable SG&A 2 per unit, 2 times 3, 8. So that's 5,000. Now for variable costing, contribution margin per unit is 6, 15 minus 6, that's 9. 6 yung ating variable cost, consisting of 4 per unit production, 2 per unit SG&A, kaya 6. So CM per unit is 15 minus 6 times unit sales, unit sold, CM 34,200. So, ang ating income, CM na 34,200 minus the total fixed expense. Ito po, 14 and 20. So, 200 po yung ating income under variable costing. You can see the difference, 5,000 and 200, that's 4,800. That's very simple to reconcile, class. Production minus sales times fixed overhead per unit. 5,000 production minus 3,800 na sales, that's 1,200. Times yung fixed overhead rate na 4. O, di yun po, 4,800. I-deduct nyo na lang sa 5,000 yun eh. Di yun na yung variable costing income na 200. Or kung 200 naman ang na-compute mong nauna, 200 plus 4,800, o di syempre, yun po yung absorption costing income. Okay? So, yung letter C, that's just the reconciliation. Yung pong nabanggit ko kanina na from 5,000, convert to 200. The difference is 4,800 because of the fixed overhead deferred in ending inventory. Okay? Okay, tuloy po tayo. Problem number 5. Ito po ay computation ng, ayun pa rin po, over or under applied fixed. So, una, i-compute natin yung estimated annual fixed overhead. Yun pong fixed overhead rate, standard costing ito class, ano? 0.16 based on the normal capacity na 200. Ang pag-compute ng fixed overhead rate ay predetermined in particular ay estimated fixed overhead over the normal capacity or estimated capacity. Kaya kung 0.16 yung fixed overhead rate at ang normal capacity ay 200,000, ang ating estimated fixed 32,000. Saan ba natin gagamitin yan? Sa pag-compute ng over or under applied, actually, hindi naman natin gagamitin yan eh. Kasi kung pag-compute naman ng over or under applied, actual fixed, minus the applied. But in this case, because estimated fixed is equal to actual, ayan, kaya tayo nag-compute. But that is not always the case, ladies and gentlemen. Ano? Most of the time, siyempre magkaiba yan. Magkaiba naman talaga yan eh. Nagkataon lang na sa problem, sinabi dyan na equal ang actual at saka estimated fixed. Oh, so that's it. So 32,000 din po ang actual. Magko-compute tayo ng over or under applied fixed. Sa variable costing, 0. Wala tayong over or under applied fixed dyan. Sa absorption costing lang ito. Actual fixed, 32. Less applied, again, yung fixed overhead rate natin, 0.16. I-multiply mo yan doon sa units produced. 28,800 yung ating applied. 32,000 yung ating actual. So, under applied, 3,200. Kung ang estimated fixed at actual fixed ay estimated or budgeted, ibig sabihin yan, ano, equal, walang spending variance. Yung under-applied na 3,200, actually, volume variance lang yan eh. Volume variance lang yan, ladies and gentlemen. Kaya alternatively, pwede nyong computein yan yung normal capacity na 200,000 minus denominator, actual capacity attained, 180, 20,000 pang difference nun, times 0.16, yan po yung 3,200. Yan yung portion na unallocated fixed overhead. Kasi ang budget, 200. Excuse me. Ang budget, 200. 0.16 yung rate. Based sa... ang budget rather ay 32,000. 0.16 yung rate. Based sa capacity na 200,000. Aba, nung nag-apply tayo, minultiply natin yung 0.16 sa 180. Kinompute mo yung 0.16 based sa 200. Aba, di syempre, meron talagang unallocated variance or unallocated fixed overhead ng ating budget na 32. Yan po yung volume variance na in this case, yan yung under-applied na amount din. Or I mean, yung under-applied fixed dyan is purely volume variance lang kasi nga ang actual at budget ay equal. Wala tayong fixed spending. Paano ang treatment or disposition ng mga over or under-applied fixed? Dalawa ang method sa disposition niyan, ladies and gentlemen. It's either, excuse me, dispose as this way, close to cost of goods sold, or prorate or allocate to cost of goods sold, finished goods inventory, and the work in process. Well, the default there, pag walang sinabi, we assume na insignificant yung variance or over-applied, close sa cost of goods sold. Pero pag sinabi material, i-allocate ninyo. So yung 3.2 na under-applied, sinabi naman dyan sa problem, kung paano natin i-dispose. Wala palang sinabi. So, but the default there is close it to cost of goods sold. So, requirement number 3, we compute the total expense charged against revenues under absorption and under variable. So, ito po sa absorption costing. Yung cost of goods sold na 195,000 times the 0.49. Yung unit sold ay, ito po 195,000. Yung ating product cost, ito po, 0.18, 0.10, 0.05, 0.16, yan po yung 0.49. Kaya ang normal cost of goods sold, excuse me, or standard cost of goods sold, ito po, 95,550. Mayroon tayong under-applied fixed overhead. Pag under-applied po, dadagdag yan sa cost of goods sold, Kasi pag kinlose mo yan, debit to applied fixed overhead, 28,800, debit to cost of goods sold, 32, credit to factory overhead control or the actual fixed overhead na 32,000. So that will be added sa cost of goods sold. Then yung selling and administrative expenses, ito po yun, 0.14 yung variable, 150,000 naman yung fixed. Kaya ayan po, 150,000 plus 0.14 times 195, ayan po, 177,300. Total expenses, 276,050. Pag variable costing naman, ito po. Variable cost of goods sold, 195,000 times 0.33. 0.33 dahil ito po yun. Hindi na natin isasama yung 0.16. 0.18, 0.10, and 0.05 na lang. Wala tayong under or over-applied fixed overhead dyan. Variable selling, ayan po, 195,000 times 0.14. Fixed overhead, yung actual na 32,000. Fixed selling and admin, 150. Total expenses, 273,650. Observe, ladies and gentlemen, na mas mataas ang total expenses ng absorption. Ang labas niyan, mas mataas ang income ng variable costing. Mas mababa ang absorption. Well, our production is 180,000, right? Our sales ay 195. Kaya talagang lalabas dyan, variable costing income will be greater than the absorption. Or pag expense, ang comparison, mas mababang expenses ng variable costing compared sa absorption. Kung income, mas mataas ang income ng variable costing kaysa absorption. Sales exceed production. Ano ang difference ng income nila? Anong expense? Ayan po, 276,050 less 273. 650. 24. 24. Ang difference nila sa income. Yan din po yung pang-reconcile natin eh. Difference ng production and sales times fixed overhead per unit. Ang mag-explain dyan yung overhead per unit. See this. Ang na-produce 180. Ang sales 195. Yung difference niyan 15. 10,000, di ba? Times 0.16, ayun po, 24. Kasi standard costing naman ito eh. Ang fixed overhead per unit last year at fixed overhead per unit this year, pareho. Kaya kahit ang analysis na lang natin, production minus sales, or sales minus production, whatsoever, times fixed overhead per unit. Yun ang difference ng income lagi. Pero iba kung actual costing, unless walang beginning inventory. Eh dito kasi, standard costing, dyan sa may 35,000 na beginning inventory, ang fixed overhead dyan, 0.16 din. Ilan ang ending inventory dyan? 180 produced plus beginning 35 minus 195,000 sales. 20,000 ang ending dyan eh. Doon sa 20,000 na ending, ang fixed overhead doon, pareho din, 0.16 kasi standard costing nga tayo eh. So, pagkumparahin lang ang production at sales times fixed overhead per unit, yun ang difference ng income. Yun din ang difference ng expenses. Di ba? So, yan po ang sagot sa number 4. Variable costing will report higher income by 2-4. Ayan, ang ating illustration sa problem. We now proceed to multiple choice for number 1. Ang tanong po ay, how should this cost be classified? Yung 100,000 na fixed overhead at variable selling cost na 80. Pag variable costing, period cost yan eh. Walang product cost dyan. 180,000 period cost, product cost 0. Number 2, which is an argument against the use of variable costing. Under pass number 2, ang fixed overhead, necessary element ng manufacturing. Hindi ka naman makakapag-produce ng inventory pag wala kang mga equipment. Wala kang mga fixed capacity. Hindi ka makakaproduce. Kumbaga, cost necessary to bring the inventory to its intended form and location. Necessary yon, necessary element. Eh dapat product cost yon. Kaya yan ay disadvantage ng variable costing. It excludes fixed overhead, which is necessary element ng production. Number 3. Alin po dyan ang incorrectly accounted? That's very simple. Packaging and shipping cost. Selling expense yan. Hindi yan product cost. Manufacturing supplies, variable overhead yan eh. Under absorption and variable, product cost yan. Insurance on factory, fixed overhead yan. Absorption, product cost. Pag variable, period cost. Kaya tama yung B. Direct labor cost, pareho naman na product cost yan. So letter D. Packaging and shipping, yan po ay selling expense. Period cost po yan. Next, number 4. Using absorption costing, the company's operating income in 2015 would be, pansinin ninyo, manufacturing cost 600, variable, fixed 400, non-manufacturing. So, expense lahat yan pag non-manufacturing, no? 500 and 300, that's 800. Only 85,000 units sold. Ilan ang na-produce? 100. So, yung 600 and 400, total cost of goods manufactured yan actually para sa 100,000 yon. So, our unit cost under absorption is 600 plus 400, that's 1 million, over 100,000, that's 10 per unit. 10 per unit, right? If the selling price per unit is 30, 10 per unit yung ating production cost, gross profit per unit is 20. 85,000 times 20, yan po ang gross profit, which is 1,700,000. Then we deduct the non-manufacturing costs. They are actually expense, ano? Minus 800. And so we have that 900,000 operating income absorption. Under variable costing naman, $840,000. Production minus sales, 15,000. Ang fixed overhead po dyan, 400,000 divided by 100,000 units, 4 per unit. So, production minus sales times 4, 60,000 yung difference ng income. Absorption income is greater by 60. Kasi 15,000 units times 4, ano? 4 per unit. Oh, so that is 60,000. 900 minus 60, that is the 840,000. Or you may compute the normal way. You compute the sales. You deduct the variable cost of goods sold. You deduct the variable non-manufacturing. You deduct the fixed manufacturing na 400. You deduct the non-manufacturing na fixed 300. Yan din ang lalabas, 840. Alam nyo, class, isa ito sa madaling topic sa managerial accounting. Kaya, pag lumabas ito, huwag nyong sasayangin. Okay? Next, number 6. Ang tanong, difference between operating income calculated on the absorption costing basis and on the variable costing basis. Alam nyo naman ang difference niyan eh. Production minus sales yan. Times the fixed overhead per unit. Wala namang mga beginning inventory dyan. So wala tayong problemahin na kung ano ang overhead rate last year. So, 2,200,000 divided by units produced na 270,000 o 275,000. O, the 8 per unit. Production minus sales, ang difference nila, 25,000 times 8. So, yan po ay 200,000. Tama? 25,000 times 8, that's 200,000. Absorption costing income will be greater, 200,000. Next, number 7. Finished goods inventory under the variable costing. Oh, napakasimpleng computing yan. Pag variable costing, ang product cost, mga variable manufacturing lang. So yan po, 630,000 variable cost of goods manufactured. I-divide nyo sa units manufactured na 70,000 o di 9 per unit. Ang ending inventory natin, kasi 60,000 yung units sold, 70 minus 60, 10,000. Times 9, ayan po, 90,000 na ending inventory, finished goods inventory. Referring to number 7, what is the operating income under absorption? Okay, we compute first the unit cost under absorption. 630,000 plus 315,000. Yan ang total cost of goods manufactured, ano? Yan po yung total manufacturing cost for the 70,000 units. So, ang ating unit cost po dyan, 13.5. 13.5. So, ang ating cost of goods sold ay 13.5 times 60,000 or 810,000. I-deduct nyo yun sa net sales na 1,400,000. Ang ating gross profit is 590,000. 590,000. Minus OPEX, 98,000 variable at 140,000 na fixed operating. Under absorption, 352,000. 352,000. Hindi yan mahirap class, madali yan. Madali ngang topic na to eh. Okay? Next. Here is the flexible budget for the product X. And the 200,000 budget has been adopted and will be used for allocating the fixed manufacturing cost. So that is the denominator capacity for computing our fixed overhead rate. And also it says there that all fixed costs are budgeted and incurred uniformly throughout the year, and all costs incurred coincide with the budget. Over and under applied fixed are deferred until year end. Wala tayong spending variance sa fixed. Kung mayroong over or under applied, it's due to volume. O, eto po, number 9. What is the over or under applied fixed? Madali lang po yan. Una, i-compute ang fixed overhead rate. Ang ating denominator capacities to compute the rate is ito po, 200,000, ano? The fixed budget ng overhead, 200. Kaya, 1 per unit. Ayan, ang ating overhead rate na fixed. Ang actual fixed ay equal dun sa budget daw eh. And that is incurred uniformly throughout the year. So, 200,000 na budget divided by 12, that's the monthly times 6 kasi 6 na buwan or 1/2 ng 200. Ang actual fixed 100. Less applied. Ang applied, imo-multiply po yung rate dun sa units produced. Ayan, 120. Over applied ng 20,000. Pero i-differ pa yan until year end daw. Kaya pag magko-compute ng income under absorption costing, hindi nyo pa yan i-adjust sa cost of goods sold. Okay? Kaya dito po sa ating number 10, net income absorption under, for the first 6 months, ito po ang ating computation. Selling price per unit pala natin is 8 kasi yung sales ng 200,000 units, 1.6. So, 8. Variable manufacturing per unit, 3 per unit. Kasi ang ating budgeted variable manufacturing, ito po, divided by 200,000, so that's 3. So, unit cost 4. Variable selling and other expense, 2 per unit. Ito po yan. Ito po yung budget. 400 over 200 na denominator capacity. Kaya ang ating gross margin, selling price 8 minus 4 na unit cost, times 60,000 units sold. Kasi ang units sales lang dyan, ito po. Yan, sales. So, yan po ay 240,000 minus selling and other expense. Yun pong fixed selling, 1/2 ng 160,000 din, of course, 80. And then yung ating variable, 60,000 units sold times 2 per unit, ayun po, 200. Income, 40. Wala pa po tayong close na over under applied fix ha, kasi to be deferred until year end. Now, under absorption, variable costing, ito po yung income. 0. Ang contribution margin natin per unit ay 3. 8 yung selling price, 3 yung variable production cost, 2 yung variable selling, 8 minus 3 minus 2, that's 2 pesos per unit, 3 per unit. So that's 180,000, less fixed expense. Kalahati ng 200, kalahati ng 160, ayan, 180,000. 0. Now, you cannot reconcile yung 40 tsaka 0 kasi naka-differ pa yung ating over-applied. Pero kung magre-reconcile tayo ay hindi ito ang tunay na income ng absorption kung i-close na yung over-applied. Pag over-applied po, bawas sa cost of goods sold. Kaya dagdag sa income yan yung 20. Ang income, 60. Pag i-close na yung over-applied. O, di 60 halimbawa, less. Fixed overhead in ending. Wala naman tayong beginning dyan 1 per unit yung fix Ilan ang ending inventory? Na-produce 120, sales 60, o di 60 times 1, kaya 0. Kung i-reconcile nyo. Okay? Kasi baka i-reconcile nyo 40 tapos 0, di lalabas. Kasi dahil doon sa over-applied fixed. Next, number 12. Which is incorrect. A, B, C. Correct ang mga yan. Sa letter D, pag full costing or absorption costing, net income would have been higher for the first year of operations if fewer units had been manufactured. Bakit mali yan? Alam nyo naman sa full costing, actual costing, halimbawa, pag marami yung units produced, madidilute yung per unit na fixed. Halimbawa, 5 million units dyan, 10 million yung fixed, 2 per unit. Pero pag ang na-produce mo lang 4 million, 2.5 per unit. Higher production, lower cost per unit. Higher income. Sabi dyan income would have been higher for the first year if fewer units had been manufactured. Mali. Halimbawa, 4 million ang na-produce dyan, lahat ng 10 million magiging part ng cost. Kasi nabenta 4 million Di lower ang income. Kaya mali yung letter D po. Yung A tama yan, yung B tama, yung C tama din. Next, number 13. How much is the adjusted cost of sales? Under or over applied is treated as adjustment to cost of goods sold. The normal capacity is 10,000 units. The fixed overhead, 20. Our fixed overhead rate in that case is 2 per unit. 20,000 divided by 10,000 units. Tama? So, ang ating under-applied fixed, ay ito po. Actual fixed, 20,000. Ang actual ay, at budget ay equal daw eh. Kaya yan, 20,000 din tayo dito. Less applied, 8,000 times 2, 16. Under 4,000. So we now compute the adjusted cost of sales. Normal cost of goods sold. 14 yan kasi 12 na variable at 2 per unit na fixed. 109,200. At dahil under applied fixed po ito, add natin. 109,200 plus 4,000. Adjusted cost of goods sold is 113,200. Next, number 14, which is false. Yan po, letter D. Kasi sinabi dyan, profits under absorption costing are influenced by sales volume. Mali po yan. Yun pong absorption costing, sumasabay yung income dyan sa production. Profit fluctuates with production, not by sales. Sa variable costing, the income fluctuates with sales. Pero pag absorption, profit fluctuates with production. Number 15. Dali lang. Nauuhaw ako. Okay, number 15. Ang requirement is cost of ending inventory, direct and absorption costing. Napakasimple po yan, ano? Pag variable costing, 12 per unit yung ating manufacturing cost na variable. O di multiply nyo na lang yan sa ending inventory. Ang tanong, ilan ang ending inventory? Ang unit sales po dyan ay 225,000 divided by the selling price na 22.5. Yan po yung sales, 225,000. Ano po? Ang selling price per unit, 22.5. Kaya 10,000 units yung sold. 12,000 yung units manufactured. So ending inventory ay 2,000. 2,000 times 12, o di 24,000 po. Sa absorption costing naman, etong fixed overhead na 37,500, i-allocate natin yan sa units produced. 37,500 divided by we have a normal capacity rather, no? So, the fixed overhead rate per unit ay 37,500 divided by the 12,500. 3 per unit ang fixed overhead rate. Kaya ang ating unit cost of the product ay 12 plus 3, that's 15. 2,000 units ending inventory times 15, the cost of ending inventory absorption is 30,000. Okay? For number 16, under variable costing, which of the following is true? For year 1, the net income was 1,400. Ang selling price po dyan, 20 pesos per unit. Wala tayong variable selling. Ang variable lang yung manufacturing, 1 plus 2 plus 3. That is 6. So 20 minus 6, CM per unit is 14. So the total CM is 800 times 14. Yan po ay 11,200. Minus fixed expenses, yung pong 4,800 na fixed overhead, at yung 5,000 na fixed selling and administrative. So that's 1,400 income for year 1. Number 17, which is true, under the variable costing, the ending inventory was 2,400, year 2. We check, ano? Ang variable costing Product cost natin, 6 per unit, ha? Sa year 1, 1,000 produced, 800 sold, 200 ending. Plus units produced year 2, 1,2. Total units available for sale, 1,4 minus 1,000 units sold. Ending natin, 400. 400 times 6, o yan po yung 2,4 na ending inventory under variable costing. Number 18, under variable costing, what is the total contribution margin? If 1,500 units are sold. Well, that's very simple. Malamin lang po natin ano ang ating CM per unit. 40 ang selling price minus materials 4 minus DL 10, variable overhead 5, and then variable marketing and admin na 2, 4 plus 10 plus 5 plus 2. Yan po ay, ilan yun? $21. So 40 minus 21, 19 per unit times 1,500, 28,500 total contribution margin. Next, number 19, the amount of fixed overhead deferred to a future time period. Ang tinutukoy dyan na naka-defer na fixed overhead is yung fixed overhead na nasa ending. Ang beginning natin, 10,000 units, produced 80, ending 15. O, given na pala yung ending eh. 15,000 units ending. Magkano dyan? Magkano ang fixed overhead na nandyan sa 15,000 units? The total fixed overhead is 80,000. We produced 80,000 units. The fixed overhead per unit is 1. So, 15,000 units ending times 1, o the 15,000 fixed overhead deferred. Nasa cost ng ending inventory pa po yun. Pag absorption ha, kasi pag variable wala yun. Ngayon naman, under absorption costing, kailan nare-release yung fixed overhead sa inventory? Kapag ang total fixed overhead na naka-charge sa revenue ay greater than the annual fixed overhead, yun yung marirelease. Mangyayari yan kapag mas marami ang nabenta kaysa na-produce. Pag mas marami kang na-produce kaysa nabenta, nag-increase yung inventory yan. Ang labas doon. Talagang may madi-differ. No? So, fixed overhead will be released from inventory if production is less than sales. Or sales is greater than production. Yan po ang ibig sabihin nun. Number 21, under which condition will absorption costing income be greater than variable? O diba, pag absorption, mataas ang production, mas mataas ang income ng absorption compared sa variable. Production greater than sales. Pag production is greater than sales, ibig sabihin nun, nag-increase ang inventory. Inventory is increased. Next, number 22, compute the gross margin and then the contribution margin. Yung ating units produced ay 10,000. Ang fixed overhead mo ay 80,000. And the 80,000 over 10,000, 8 per unit yung fixed. So, ang total unit cost natin under absorption ay 4 na material, labor na 10, variable manufacturing na 8, 22, plus 8 na fixed, 30, ang ating unit cost. Gross profit per unit, 50 minus 30, that's 20. Times the units sold na 8,000, 160,000 ang gross margin. Gross margin, no? Ngayon, yung ating contribution margin naman, computein natin. Variable cost 4 plus 10 plus 8, 22. And 4 na variable selling. 4 plus 10 plus 8, that's 22 plus 4, 26. So 24 per unit. Yung ating CM, ano? 50 minus 26, that's 24. So 24 times our units sold na 8,000, 192,000 yung ating contribution margin against the 160,000 gross margin. So gross margin is 32,000 less than the contribution margin. Next, number 23. 8,000 units increased in inventory. So production must be greater than sales. Ang tanong is, magkano ang difference ng income? Or what would be the effect on income if absorption is used rather than variable? Madali lang yan. Multiply nyo lang yan sa fixed overhead per unit, 8,000 times 5. 40,000 increase. Mas mataas ang production kaysa sales sa kasong yan kasi nag-increase yung ating inventory. Number 24. Volume variance. I-compute ang rate. Yan ang una. 200,000 divided by 20,000, that's the overhead rate. Yung pong budgeted fixed, 200,000. Normal activity, 20,000, kaya 10. Actual fixed, 215. Pero ang kukomputin natin, volume variance eh. Hindi po over or under applied fixed. Kanina, binabanggit ko, yung mga na-compute natin na over or under applied, yan na rin ang volume. Sabi ko, kasi sinabi ng problem, na ang actual at budget equal. Walang spending variance, ibig sabihin nun. Pero in this case, ang actual fixed 215. Ang applied natin dyan ay yung 18,000 times 10, 180. 215 actual minus 180 applied, 35,000 ang under-applied rather. Under-applied. Dalawang klaseng variance ang naroon. Ano yon? Spending tsaka volume. Magkano ang spending? Actual na 215 minus budgeted na 200, o di 15. Ano yung natitirang variance? Volume variance yon. Paano ko kumpitin yon? Fixed budget minus applied. Or normal capacity. 20,000 minus actual capacity used to compute the applied. 2,000 ang difference nun eh, times 10. Ayan. Ang ano kasi niyan, kino-compute ng volume variance, yung portion ng budgeted fixed na unallocated or over-allocated eh. So 20,000 volume variance. More on that pagdating natin sa standard costing and variance analysis po bukas, Sabado. Next, number 25. Ending inventory under variable costing. Napakasimple naman yan eh. Di ba? Pag variable costing, yung 20 per unit lang lang kukunin natin na production cost. O ilan bang na-produce? 11,000. Ilan bang nabenta? 10,500. O di 500, ang ending inventory times variable cost ng production, 20. Ayun po, 10,000 units. At yan ang kabuuan ng ating MAS 1.2.4. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat kung kayo ay nag-viewing. Kung hindi naman, maraming salamat na rin. Kung kayo ay, kung kukunin nyo ang mga sagot sa handouts at mapapag-aralan ninyo, tsatsagahin nyo lang talaga to class. Wala tayong magagawa. Wala naman tayong option eh. Ginagawa ko lang naman yung aking tungkulin. Sana gawin nyo rin ang inyong tungkulin. Para, in compliance tayo. At, alam nyo, pag naawa ang Diyos sa atin, naawa ang Diyos sa inyo, madali kayong mag-CPA. Sige po, maraming salamat at paalala bukas, alas 9, job order costing under Professor Season. Alauna, take up ko yung standard costing para dudugtong dito. Pang-AFAR din naman yun pang-cost accounting din yun. Then sa linggo po ay Attorney Bakilan for law. Ang topic ni attorney ay corporation. At may i-announce ko na rin in advance, next week, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., diretsong may review tayo, may lecture tayo, may klase tayo. Ang subject po ay FAR. Ang topic po ay liabilities and equity. Under Professor Ramilo C. Gloria, alas 5 hanggang alas 8 ng gabi. Diretso po yun, Monday to Friday. Okay? Maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig. Bye.